The first clue was not what the German torpedo carried. It was what it did not carry. When the recovered weapon was rolled into a Royal Navy workshop in the autumn of 1943, the men around the cradle expected to see the usual hardware at the nose. A striker, a contact pistol, some clean little piece of engineering that told the warhead when steel had been hit. There was nothing. No impact spike, no obvious trigger, no blunt mechanical answer to the question every torpedo had been built to ask. Had it touched the ship yet? Instead, set flush into the gray-green metal were two small dark openings. Not large, not dramatic, barely wider than a man's thumb. They looked less like part of a weapon and more like ears. Lieutenant Commander Arthur Mallory stood over the nose for nearly a minute before he spoke. The others in the room waited because they knew that look. Mallory was not admiring German workmanship. He was trying to understand why a killing machine would arrive with the killing mechanism missing from the front. Then he said the line that changed the room. "This thing is not waiting to hit a ship. It is waiting to hear one." By then, Allied escort crews had already started to fear a pattern they could not see. Convoy ships were not being struck cleanly amidships. Escorts were being hit from behind. Stern plates torn open, rudder gears smashed, propeller shafts bent out of line. Ships that had survived bombs, mines, and Atlantic storms were suddenly dying where they were supposed to be strongest, at the machinery that kept them moving. There was often no visible track, no warning. No clean geometry that a watch officer could reconstruct afterward. A destroyer would be cutting across the black water behind a convoy, and then the sea would lift at the stern. Not because the U-boat had aimed better. Because the torpedo had. The weapon in Mallory's workshop was a German T-5, the acoustic homing torpedo the Allies would soon call GNAT. German naval acoustic torpedo, the Germans called it Zaunkönig, the wren, a small bird with a sharp song. The name was almost too delicate for what it did. It did not need a perfect firing solution. It did not need the target to stay on one straight path. It did not even need to see the hull. It only needed the target to make noise, and every escort in the Atlantic made noise. Mallory's team began with the nose. Petty Officer Samuel Pike, a torpedo artificer with hands scarred by years of salt, oil, and stripped bolts, set the recovered casing into a timber cradle. Beside him was Dr. Eleanor Vale, an Admiralty acoustic specialist who had spent most of the war trying to help ships find submarines by sound. The fourth member of the team, an electrical engineer named Harris from a naval contractor, had been sent because somebody expected unusual wiring. They found more than wiring. They removed the forward cover in the careful silence of men opening a door in the dark. Behind the nose were two hydrophones mounted apart on a rigid frame. Small sound receivers, one angled to port, one angled to starboard. Not decorations, not emergency gear. Not a crude listening device bolted onto a normal torpedo as an experiment. They were the front end of the weapon. Vale bent close enough that her breath fogged the cold casing. The two receivers were not pointed straight ahead. They were splayed outward, just enough to compare the water on one side with the water on the other. That was the first revelation. The torpedo was not listening for a sound and reporting it to a human operator. There was no human operator. It was listening for a difference. A louder propeller on the left meant steer left. A louder propeller on the right meant steer right. Equal sound meant hold the rudder steady and keep running. It was not clever in the way a machine on paper looks clever. It was worse than that. It was simple, and because it was simple, it could be built in numbers. That bothered Harris more than anything else. When he opened the guidance section, he did not find a laboratory miracle. He found relays, contacts, coils, ordinary-looking components arranged with brutal patience. The kind of parts a competent factory could assemble again and again. The kind of system that did not need a genius at sea to make it work. A production weapon is more frightening than a brilliant prototype. A prototype proves something can be done. A production weapon proves someone has already decided to do it to you. For 2 days, Vale worked on the acoustic circuit. She fed controlled tones into the receivers and watched the signal wake and disappear. Low tones faded into nothing. Higher noise vanished as if the torpedo had gone deaf, but inside one narrow band the output came alive. Not all ship noise. Not engine rumble. Not wave slap. Not the general thunder of the Atlantic. Propeller noise. That was the second revelation. The T-5 was not listening for a ship. It was listening for the part of the ship that could not lie. A hull could be painted. A course could be changed. A convoy could scatter. A captain could order darkness and silence above decks. But a propeller at combat speed chewed the water in a recognizable way. It made bubbles collapse. It made pressure tear and reform. It wrote a signature into the sea. The Germans had built a weapon that could read that signature. Mallory understood the tactical horror before he understood the full strategic one. If an escort suspected a T-5 in the water, The purest answer was to stop the propellers. No propeller noise, no acoustic target. But an escort with stopped propellers in a U-boat attack was not safe, it was bait. A convoy escort existed to move, to turn, to chase contacts, to cut across a submarine's firing line, to shield slow merchantmen carrying fuel, food, ammunition, and men. Telling that ship to stop its screws was like telling a boxer to survive by putting his hands in his pockets. Vale said it anyway because the physics did not care about doctrine. If it follows the screw, she told Mallory, then the screw is the lure. That sentence stayed in his notes. The screw is the lure. For a week, the team believed that was the worst of it. Then Pike found the delay. It was a small mechanical timing arrangement tucked behind the guidance system. Easy to miss if a man was only looking for the obvious. Its job was to keep the torpedo running straight for the first several hundred yards after launch. At first, that looked like a limitation. It was not. It was self-preservation. The U-boat that fired the weapon also had propellers. Without a delay, the torpedo might hear the closest noise in the sea, turn too early, and curl back toward the submarine that launched it. The Germans had not simply made the weapon listen. They had taught it when not to listen. That was the third revelation. And this was the moment when the torpedo stopped feeling like a clever attachment and started feeling like a complete system. The nose listened. The filter chose what mattered. The relays compared left against right. The rudder obeyed the louder side. The delay protected the submarine. The warhead was tuned for the stern, where one detonation could wreck the machinery that turned a ship from a weapon into a drifting target. Every part agreed with every other part. There was no wasted idea in it. Harris sat with the wiring diagram under a bare lamp and kept drawing it until the lines stopped looking like German electronics and started looking like intent. He said almost nothing that evening. Pike, who noticed small things because torpedo men survived by noticing them, later wrote that Harris stared at the drawing as if it had accused him of something. It had, because the T-5 did not only say, "Germany has built a new torpedo." It said something colder. Germany had been listening to Allied ships long enough to know what to build. Vale proved it on the 6th week. She compared the torpedo's active acoustic band against the Admiralty's own noise records for convoy escorts, destroyers, frigates, corvettes, the working ships of the Atlantic War. The vessels that did the ugly job behind the convoy lanes, hunting contacts, screening merchants, turning back again and again into the dark. At standard patrol speeds, their propellers did not just fall somewhere inside the torpedo's listening band. They sat where the weapon heard best, near the center. For a while, nobody in the room spoke, not because they doubted the measurement, because they understood what it meant. The T-5 had not been designed to chase ships in general. It had been shaped around the acoustic habits of the ships hunting U-boats. The Germans had not merely invented a listening weapon. They had tuned that weapon to the men sent out to stop them. The target was not a vessel. The target was the escort, the bodyguard, the ship that turned back when the merchantmen kept moving. That changed the feeling of the whole examination. The torpedo was no longer just an enemy machine on a bench. It was evidence that the enemy had made a study of them. Their speeds, their propellers, their habits under pressure, their protective instincts. In that room, the weapon became a mirror. It showed Britain not German engineering first, but British vulnerability. And it showed that vulnerability in numbers, copper wire, filtered sound, and 2 small holes at the nose. The Admiralty did not have the luxury of being offended by the discovery. Convoys were still crossing. U-boats were still waiting. Escort captains still had to decide, in black weather and bad visibility, whether a sound behind them was water, machinery, or death turning toward their stern. So the answer had to be fast, not elegant, not prestigious, not a better acoustic torpedo, a lie. That was the principle behind the countermeasure that became known as Foxer. It was almost embarrassingly crude compared with the T-5. A towed noisemaker. Metal pieces dragged behind the ship, rattling, clattering, hammering the water with a sound louder and more tempting than the ship's own propellers. A false screw, a decoy voice. If the German weapon was built to follow the loudest propeller-like sound, then the British would give it one. 200 yards astern, far enough from the ship to matter. The first crews did not love it. Foxer was noisy. It interfered with sonar. It made the sea behind an escort sound like a workshop dropped into a storm drain. It turned anti-submarine hunting into a trade-off. Protect yourself from the torpedo, and you might blind yourself to the submarine. But that was the kind of war the Atlantic had become. Not clean advantage, exchange. Every answer cost something. Mallory knew the cost. Vale knew it better. A decoy that saved the stern could make the ship worse at finding the attacker. But without a decoy, the ship might not survive long enough to hunt anything. So the doctrine changed. Crews learned to tow the noise. Captains learned to turn differently. Engine rooms learned that speed could be danger and silence could be survival. Watch officers learned that sometimes the right move was not to flee the weapon, but to confuse its idea of where the ship was. The T-5 had forced the Allies to think like the torpedo. What does it hear? What does it ignore? What does it choose? What lie would it believe? That was the hidden contest. Not steel against steel, perception against perception. And once the British understood the weapon's perception, the weapon began to lose its terror. Reports changed. A torpedo that would have curved into a destroyer's stern began to run past, chasing the clatter behind it. Explosions bloomed in the wake, violent enough to shake men on deck, but too far back to rip out the shafts. Escorts still feared the sound. Nobody who had seen a stern blown open became casual about it. But fear had a shape now, and a shaped fear can be fought. By early 1944, the T-5 was no longer the invisible executioner it had seemed to be in the autumn. It remained dangerous. It remained brilliant in the cold, practical way good weapons are brilliant. But the mystery had been broken, and that mattered more than the metal. Because weapons often win their first victories in the space before they are understood. The unknown makes them larger than they are. The pattern without explanation becomes a superstition. The unexplained loss becomes proof that nothing can be done. Mallory's team did not defeat the T-5 by building something more advanced in 6 weeks. They defeated the first part of it by refusing to be hypnotized by it. They opened the nose, they traced the wires, they measured the filter, they found the delay. They compared the numbers against their own ships. They accepted the insult hidden inside the design. Then they made the ocean lie. Years later, a T-5 could sit in a museum case and look almost ordinary. A long gray cylinder. A wartime artifact. A piece of engineering sealed behind glass for visitors who could read the panel, nod once and move on to the next weapon. But the most important part of it was still easy to miss. The 2 small openings at the nose. They did not look like the beginning of a crisis. They did not look like a strategic intelligence failure. They did not look like the reason escort captains changed doctrine in the middle of an ocean war. They looked like holes. But in 1943, those holes meant that the sea itself had become part of the targeting system. Every propeller was speaking. Every escort was announcing itself. Every ship sent to protect the convoy carried, in its own movement, the sound that could bring a torpedo home. And the men who stopped it did not stop it by making the ships louder, faster, or more heroic. They stopped it by understanding the sentence the weapon was trying to hear. Then they gave it the wrong answer.